Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app. We're now on Red Circle as well as Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. Also check us on the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons. Also check out 5reasonsports.com. Spell that one out for the latest content without a paywall. And check out our great sponsors. That includes Prize Picks. Use the code 5 FIVE. Get your initial deposit matched up to $100. You can play 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, even 6 players together. You can also, again, mix sports, which is really cool this time of year. NBA and NFL, play them together. MMA as well. There are no rollovers. So literally use that code 5 FIVE. You get your initial deposit matched up to 100 and you can use it immediately. So go to Prize Picks, Google Play Store, Apple App Store, and prizepicks.com. Use that code FIVE. And now, tonight's episode.
Down the Biscayne. Yeah, 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
All right, welcome back to 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Here's today's floor plan. We got the entire crew here today. I'm actually out of town. I'm up in Boston, but we got Greg in his usual home. We've got Alex. We've got Brady Manning down in South Florida. We're going to talk about the bigs tonight, but not Bam Adebayo. It's not a Bam Adebayo episode, but this is a how do they complement Bam best as a backup so that they can kind of escape what have been their worst minutes of the season. We will talk about those as we go forward. Do they have a viable option there? And then also, does that viable option possibly free up some situations for trades as we go forward into the trade deadline, but more specifically, January 15th, which is when all of their contracts, the Heat's contracts, will be vested based on offseason signings, and they'll be able to essentially trade the entire roster if they want to. But we're going to get to the trade stuff later, because for them to make a trade of a big, someone like a Dwayne Dedmon and his contract, you have to actually have other bigs on the roster who can play, because obviously without Bam on the floor, they haven't had Omer Yurtseven. We're going to talk about him a little bit tonight. They really don't trust Nikola Jovic for big minutes. We've seen him start, but he never plays more than about 15, 18 minutes under Erik Spoelstra. And again, Yurtseven's been out since surgery in training camp. So they need one other guy to emerge, and maybe 2 other guys, okay, as we go forward here. And Orlando Robinson is somebody that caught our attention even before he signed, that this was somebody that the Heat had their eyes on. A mobile big who went undrafted. He flashed a little bit in training camp, but we weren't really sure where that would go. And again, there was more focus on Yurtseven. He went back down to the G League. He did some good things there, but now he's come up and he seems much more confident, comfortable, and there was a lot to like. And he kind of broke out with this 15.9 rebound game in the win against Minnesota. And he did it. And as much as we mock Rudy Gobert, he's still a defensive player of the year, and Orlando Robinson did it against Rudy Gobert. So we're going to go to the basketball stuff on this first. Brady and Alex, I want to get to you guys, and then we're going to get into some of the ramifications of this with Greg as we go look ahead to trade deadline, etc. What do you like, Brady?
Yeah, I mean, with Orlando Robinson himself, I feel like he's just steady enough right now, and he hasn't even had a lot of minutes. I was just looking at some of the base stats. He had a 32-minute game, which is kind of his first NBA game. Was that game in Washington where they just had nobody. They barely lost that game, but he was really solid in that one. If we think back to it, he had 14 points, just base stats. He had 7 boards, but he was like closing that game when everybody had eyes on Nikola Jovic. We fast forward to the next game that he played high minutes was recently in Houston. He had a 35-minute game. I know we finished that game up and it was like all Tyler talk because Tyler just went crazy in that game. He had the historic night in general, but Orlando Robinson was like pretty sneaky, very good in that game in his role. He had 9 points in that game with 6 boards. And then the last game is kind of the third game that he played high minutes. There's basically been 3 instances, and this past one was kind of his best game, I'd say, from top to bottom. I'd say with what he can do, I don't really like when he stretches the floor too much just because he's that good inside the paint. Like that's always been his game. So like when guys that early start stretching out too much, it becomes problematic. But last night we saw him basically, his role was simple. Like he was basically just going to keep rolling. When they were going to blitz Tyler, they were going to blitz Kyle. He makes himself available on the roll. It was something I was talking about a lot because usually younger bigs, like they get in there, they set a screen and they sprint. Like they're just running 100 miles an hour to the basket. Like he's very like methodical and slow about his reads. Like he kept getting it on the roll and he kind of take his time. He'd take a dribble, he'd lay it in. It got to a point in that game where they were running actions through, which they love to do. They don't care who you are. If you're a big man with just some type of base playmaking skills, they are going to use you as a playmaking hub. And they were running stuff for specifically for Duncan, where they would put Orlando Robinson at like the elbow and they'd run stuff, handoffs and different things of that nature, which they did a lot with Yurtseven last year. But there's just a lot of things alike. His touch around the basket. And then it really comes down to, as we talk about what we've been seeing with Dedmon, when we watched him in any of these games, and specifically this past ones, that's what we're talking about. Nothing felt clunky, like at all. Like when he's out there, like it went pretty smooth for the most part. Like we could talk about his efficiency. He was 7 of 9. We could talk about all that. But it's like, what I've been saying is like, you are never in a million years going to match Bam Adebayo's production. Like if you're a backup big in this league, you're always trying to stay neutral for the most part and not go too far into the negative. But it's even tougher with what Bam does defensively. But it gets to a point where you just have to become neutral as possible. And when the ability to just not get in the way, it feels like it's as simple as that, like not doing too much, not pushing, just playing a specific role. It feels like he can do that. So I'm interested, I guess. The question becomes, I know we're going to get into a lot of different angles with this, but the question becomes, as much as the fans are talking about this, as much as we're going to be talking about this, when Dwayne Dedmon returns, is he going to be the backup big again? I think it's very possible that we see that at the beginning, but I think right now it's fun to talk about Orlando Robinson because I think everybody wants to see him, and I don't think there's that much of a difference. I guess it's just a younger guy with more upside and more ability to do different things.
Yeah, and the one thing that I think we need to make clear here as we move forward later into more of Greg's portion of this is that the Heat don't really do the showcasing guys thing. Like we talked all year about Duncan Robinson, and fans are like, well, I have to play him because there are reasons to play Duncan Robinson. Okay. But the reason to play Duncan Robinson is not so that other teams can see what he can do. Other teams know what he can do. This showcasing idea is a pretty stupid concept, honestly. I mean, unless it's a really young player that nobody has seen at this level and you need to see like what he can do against certain types of players, I get it. But somebody like Duncan Robinson is established at this point as a shooter, what he is and what he isn't. Dwayne Dedmon at this stage is established. I mean, they basically picked him up, he doesn't like to say it, but off the couch, essentially a couple of seasons ago. Okay. So there's no reason to play Dwayne Dedmon to showcase him, to show that he can still be a valuable second or third center for another team. Everybody knows what he is and what he isn't. And honestly, he's less than he was 2 years ago. And he's less for this roster. So there's no reason to really push that. I don't necessarily think that they're going to put Dedmon back in at the very beginning when he comes back. I think that this team, I think there is a recognition that they need to start leaning in a bit of a different direction here and look for some new options because it has gotten stale. I've talked about it on the podcast, on the stream last night. That is the word that gets used a lot about this season, and not just from us or from the fans. It's the players. It's the people around the players. They need an injection of life. What kind of injection of life can Orlando Robinson provide as a player?
I mean, it's tough, right? Because you don't expect him to do a lot, but it's like what Brady was talking about there. I don't think the baseline is to be Bam Adebayo in the minutes that you're on the floor. The baseline is to just survive those minutes and to be a good, productive backup five. And look, Dwayne Dedmon provided that for, I don't know, let's be generous, about 2 seasons or so, right? And that's good and fine. He is playing through plantar fasciitis right now, and the numbers bear it out. I know I mentioned it all over the place, but just looking at it now, updated, negative 9.53 net rating when he's on the floor. They are just getting destroyed when he's on the floor. And it's been a large enough sample size now. Like by this point in time, we know what he is and what he isn't, like you said. And the problem is it's not even solid enough anymore. Like they have to do something about it. And I think it would be nice if Spo were to play Orlando Robinson more and we can get a little bit more of a sample size of what he is and isn't. as of right now, and like the limited amount of time he's gotten, they're absolutely killing it with him on the floor, right? Like, and he's not necessarily out there playing with all the starters all the time. It's not like he's in these cushy lineups and the Heat by no means have dominated in net rating and kind of at all this season. So the fact that they're a plus 8.40 with him on is already impressive to me. He's done it in kind of every aspect that you want a big who fits in with the rest of the guys. Like he's checking off all the boxes. He's doing it as a roller. He's doing it as a rebounder. He's doing it as a rim protector. He's gotten some steals. He's done it as a playmaker, like Brady was talking about there, like just making the right passes and doing the right things and just being extremely active and, just running the floor. We were talking about it together watching the game last night, and it's just a breath of fresh air watching him on the floor, man. Like, it's just really nice to have another athletic guy who's out there on both ends of the floor just trying his ass off, man. And again, it's not just to, talk down on Dedmon, because I do think like the fact that he's older and playing through plantar fasciitis, like that's just really tough, man. Like I can't imagine what that's like. So, like for all we know, if he was a little bit healthier, it wouldn't be such a disaster when he's on the floor, but it just is what it is at this point. And so with that being what it is, with the Omer Yurtseven situation being what it has been, and also we know that Spo is not necessarily trying to play Nikola Jovic more as a 5. I think, right now in the short term, when guys are back, I think the move is to play Orlando Robinson.
We know that they will play their young guys, Greg. Like that, we've seen that over the past few years. Like this narrative of, well, the Heat won't play young players, which was kind of a Pat Riley first round pick narrative. We've joked that, and I think there is truth to this, that they're more likely to give a longer leash to undrafted players than to their first round picks. Like this has been a consistent thing. So they will plug in an undrafted guy. And I think sometimes it's because they want to see what they have. I feel like, not for the other teams, but for them, they want to see, do we have a viable option here? And I feel like that's what this is. Like the Dedmon injury with the plantar fasciitis, and look, that's very, very difficult to play through. I mean, all the way back to Tim Hardaway, Heat players who've had that have struggled with it. But it wasn't bothering him all season to this degree, and the numbers were bad. So it feels like this has a two-pronged effect here. It's kind of like, all right, we need an injection of life now with a different kind of player at that position. But also, we need to see if we trade Dedmon and, if we have somebody else that we can play. And also, do we have a guy that we want to continue to develop? Because they really haven't done a great job of developing bigs. I mean, they have done, if you look at the undrafted guys that they've developed, it's been shooters like Strus and Robinson, wings like you go back to a Rodney Magruder, Tyler Johnson. The one big that they developed, so to speak, was Hassan Whiteside until they overpaid him. There's not a lot there. I mean, even go back to the LeBron.
No credit for Bam.
Who's that?
No credit for Bam.
Well, but he's a first round pick. That's not what I'm talking about.
They've been spending all their attention on Bam. Ethan.
Yeah, I'm talking about developing guys that were undrafted or came to them. As we talk about them kind of mining guys.
Yeah.
I mean, even through Heat history, that hasn't really been a strength. I mean, Ike Austin was one. You're going back, 25 years at this stage, more than that, actually. Well, something roughly that. They haven't really done a lot of that. Like Gabe Vincent, they found a point guard. They had trouble finding point guards in recent years too. They went through a stretch where they found a bunch: Anthony Carter, Mike James, etc. Even Rafer Alston was kind of a reclamation project. But to develop a big, to me, that has more value. Like if they can get a guy who's a versatile player in the modern NBA, who has a motor, didn't cost them anything, and seems like he could play the 4 or the 5, which I think is beneficial here. Either way, different lineups. There's a real benefit to that. And again, as we're going to get into the second part of this episode, it frees them up a lot.
Yeah. Here's the thing with Orlando Robinson. Like let's not overstate what he can be immediately, but if he can be just a playable option right now, and then a player that you have in your pipeline that's a big that eventually can become a reserve big that you can count on. And the fact that he doesn't appear to be a player that could be played off the floor that easily as a big man, that is encouraging to me. So to me, you're right about them not necessarily having a good track record with developing a ton of bigs. UD should get credit for being a big as the leading rebounder in Heat history. But I get what you mean with like centers. Orlando Robinson is a guy that this is the perfect opportunity for them to just throw him out there, see what he can do. They need, like you said, an injection of athleticism, the length, the just being hungry, I think is good to see. This team needs to see guys that like want to fall on the floor for their job, because like maybe not everybody feels like that's necessarily a situation that they're in at this current moment. So I'm excited about it for now. And then this is the other implication. If they have to make a trade, yes, that's one thing. But also, if you have a good big in the pipeline, you don't have to use your pick on a big, and you could go in a different direction, because this team has lots of things that they need to add. And big would not be my favorite thing to focus on in a draft coming up, and they own their pick. So that's why I also want Orlando Robinson to succeed.
Well, and one of the things they need is athleticism, just generally throughout the roster. And that is something that this draft has a lot of, apparently. We'll obviously going to wait a little bit to dig in the draft. We're going to see how college basketball plays out. It's not something I'm probably going to do for 3-4 months here, actually. But I do think as we look forward, they just need to become, again, a more athletic team, younger in some spots. Even their developmental projects are older players, right? Like, because we're going to have a conversation later in the week about Strus and Vincent and who you extend, if you extend either, or maybe who you trade. But they were both older players when they came to Miami. Duncan Robinson, older player. That tends to be the case. Orlando Robinson, well, how old is he? Is he 22 this stage? 23? It doesn't feel like he's as old as some of the guys that they've had here previously. 22. So all right. So they're in a little better position here with him. And with a big,
22 is really good. Ethan.
It's really good. And you have a long timeline with him to kind of, make him into something. And we've seen them have success with some bigs in their 30s. You get a guy in their 20s, and you have a couple of years, you have him under control, team control at a cheap price. That's a good thing here. All right, we're going to talk into the implications, though, of the trade deadline for this and whether or not you're comfortable kind of going with him and maybe, again, not being as concerned about trading Dwayne Dedmon, whether he's playing well or not. Before we do, I want to tell you about another great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. It's Mobile C-Arm and Staffing Services. Okay, it's Mobile C-Arm and Staffing Services. What do? They rent the C-Arm equipment on a long and short-term basis to hospitals, surgery centers, chiropractic offices, and pain management offices. They also offer cadaver lab courses. Our friend Nelson can tell you all about it. He's been on the podcast with us. He's a big Miami Heat fan, great guy. And all you got to do is go fill out the form. So go check it out. It's www.carmandstaffing.com. That's www.c-armandstaffing.com, or call Nelson directly on his cell. I can tell you answers right away. 561-891-9620. That's 561-891-9620. c-armandstaffing.com. Again, call Nelson today and he'll help you out. We also want to tell you about our betting partner. It's betteredge.com. Use the code 5RSN there. That's the number 5RSN. You get $20 to play right away. It is peer-to-peer betting. It is legal in 45 states, including the state of Florida. So getting up towards the NFL playoffs is something you're going to want to do as well as the NBA. And we run competitions there too. And again, they don't have the rollovers either. Okay. So $20, they will give it to you right away. They'll put it right into your account. Again, betteredge.com. That's BETTOR edge.com. Use the code 5. That's the number 5 RSN.
When Shopify says you can sell anywhere, oh, they mean it. Woo, hold up. Just got a new sale. Order fulfilled and shipped. Inventory level's good. Whoa, Shopify doesn't mind if you're at sea level or on top of the world. You can run and grow your business anywhere. Climbing mountains is never easy, but at least Shopify gives me all the tools I need for my business to hit new peaks.
Whether you're selling carabiners or crop tops, start selling with Shopify today and join the platform simplifying commerce for millions of businesses worldwide. We've built the platform so you can keep climbing and grow your business to new heights.
With Shopify, you really can sell to anyone, from anywhere.
This is Possibility, powered by Shopify. Start selling online today. Sign up for a free trial at shopify.com/free22. 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 Internet connection required. Not available on mountaintops or seafloors.
So, Greg, I'm going to go to you first on this time around because, it's funny. There are different trigger dates in the NBA calendar, right? And this has become one. It's the time when you have all your chips on the table. All right. So let's try to characterize some of these chips, because we know that the Duncan Robinson chip is a negative asset at this stage, right? It is you're trading extra years of his contract. If you deal him at a high number, you were going to use that contract to possibly fill out a trade for a bigger time player before, if you could attach a bunch of picks. Duncan has made some contributions of late. He does have some value to the Heat. I think we can have a reasonable argument about whether or not they'd be better off with him playing more, but he's not going to live up to that contract in Miami. We know that it's just not, it's not in the cards. Okay. We know the direction they're going. And I think he's going to be kind of a cautionary tale as we talk about the Strus and Vincent contracts later in the week, kind of on the direction that you go with a player like that. And do you do something like that again or send anything close to that? Dedmon's a little bit of a different story here because the number's a lot lower, right? So go through the contract, what it means and what the implications are for a possible trade.
So Dwayne Dedmon was brought back and obviously was a veteran presence, a front court guy that was going to be able to be a backup. But also he was brought back on a $4.7 million expiring contract. And so it's not a coincidence that he's also a viable trade chip as an expiring deal. $4.7 million obviously is not going to go out and retrieve you a superstar in a trade, but it can be a piece of a trade, of a larger trade, and it can fill gaps in between salary matching. And with him being expiring, also with him being like the utmost professional as a person and as a player, I think that any organization that gets him and has him for the balance of this season is not going to regret that experience. So to me, I think that that's the biggest part of this. And this is, everyone, I think, expects them to maybe go for the home run swing, and I don't even know really what that looks like. And then the second most talked about thing is moving Duncan, but any Duncan situation is likely going to have to include that 2023 pick. Like, I just don't see any way around that. So I think we're looking at smaller types of deals. So Dwayne Dedmon and maybe, if you have to dangle Strus or Vincent, which we're going to talk about later in the week, who you choose and who you don't. Yurtsevin obviously is injured now. I've heard he could be back as soon as March, which is really optimistic. And maybe that changes how you think about him.
We kind of buried the lead here. I should have set you up with that the first.
No, but it's fine because like he also could be included in a deal or not. But to me, like, I think that this much more is a chip that could get them a stopgap in the front court that is functional on another team. It's just a matter of if a bigger trade starts brewing, then this could all be thrown out the window. So that's why it's very just preempted to talk about it right now.
Alex,
January 15th.
Well, yeah, Alex, let's look at it this way. Okay. If they were to trade him, and again, there could be package deals or anything like that. It doesn't have to be just one guy. That's not a big number, right? Like just Dedmon alone. I mean, you're not getting an elite guy in front court for Dedmon's expiring contract. Okay. What kind of player would you want? And how would Orlando Robinson's emergence play into that if, again, this continues?
Yeah, so that's the thing right there. And I really agree with what Leif was saying before, that like if all of a sudden Orlando emerges as somebody who is a viable backup five, which is really just what you need, right? Like, even if he's young and he's new to this, if he continues to play, it doesn't have to be at, this rate where he's, a monster on the stat lines, to be frank, for what he is. He's been, the couple of times he's had extended playing time, he's really showed it on the stat line. So it's not only just, stuff that isn't counted, that isn't quantifiable. Like I don't expect him to continue putting up insane numbers or anything like that. All you need him to be is viable and good and survive those minutes, right? And so that's possible. All of a sudden, you don't have to invest in and possibly trade one of those assets for a five, like we've talked about in other pods. And I think maybe just going all in on a 4 who you really feel good about if you're the Heat, right? Somebody who you think can help solidify and just kind of stabilize everything that they have, right? I think you got to find somebody who's out there and somebody you feel good about. And I think that's, we've been talking about this over and over for so long now, but I think between that and hopefully, I think they should take a look at trying to upgrade their shooting situation, because they, I don't think are going to continue to play Duncan a lot of minutes or anything like that when everybody's back. I think they should try to upgrade their shooting situation. Shout out John Crotty, just because I think what they have right now has kind of been a little bit adjusted for. So if all of a sudden, you're not worried about having to trade for a backup 5, you can kind of focus a little bit on the shooting and getting another 4 who is a two-way player who helps you and stabilizes the rotation, things of that sort. So, that's kind of where I stand right now. But the Dedmon thing is, like what Leif was talking about, it would be a smaller part of a bigger trade. He's not going to get you somebody on your own. You would probably have to pair him with Duncan, pair him with maybe one of your other players that he mentioned there, pair him with perhaps that first round pick. And then, you can try to stabilize the rotation that way, hopefully grab a couple of guys who can help you out in the short term. But that's kind of what I'm thinking about.
We've talked about a couple of these guys who make in that range. Greg's posting them in our chat here. Jared Vanderbilt makes $4.3 million. Grant Williams, somebody we've discussed, although he's going to require a longer term deal, $4.3 million. Torrey Craig makes $5 million. He seems like the kind of versatile player they would like. And we have discussed PJ Washington before. He makes $5.8 million. So this is all about possibly taking a contract that goes out a little further than Dedmon's, but you're also trying to move a contract in Robinson's that goes out further and is more money than those deals. So, I mean, there's a lot of kind of moving parts here. Brady, would you agree with Alex, though, that if, let's say even Robinson is functional and developing, and let's even say that you're getting Yurt back in March, although let's be honest, we don't really know what we're getting back in Yurt, because we don't even know how that was going to look. Like the Bam Yurt stuff, they didn't have a long time to work on it. It didn't look great when Spoelstra threw them together in a starting lineup once in the preseason. So we don't really know what that is. I mean, we know what Yurt provided in the minutes he got last season, but would you say that if Orlando Robinson is functional, do they still need another big there, or do you lean towards what Alex is talking about, which is, okay, go get a shooter?
Well, I think
if Duncan goes out, I guess.
Yeah, that would be, I guess it would depend, but I think more of the shooting 4 type is probably more important, but I think the extra piece would be an extra big. Like they could very much use an extra big. I think the fact you bring up Omer, what he may or may not look like, what I can say is whatever he looks like is better whatever they have right now. So like whatever he is, it's something to utilize at that point. The other point is that, and I know right now they don't sit very comfortably in the playoff standings, but like if you're focusing on a playoff run, we know the direction that Spo is going to lean eventually in that stance. So I don't think they're going to be overly, I'll say, focused on like adding these extra bigs in general, just because we know the direction they're going to go. They're going to go 8-man rotation. They're going to go lower and lower minutes for whatever backup big they're playing. I know there's been talk about, like, do you trust an Orlando Robinson, an undrafted guy who has not played at all, if he's to be thrown in a first round series in the playoffs? Orlando Robinson, if he does play, would probably be playing a total of 7.5 minutes.
Exactly.
Like, it's not going to be like a crazy thing. So I think, to Alex's point, those are more of the guys, and the names you were just mentioning are probably more important. It's the guys that can actually fit Spo's system, fit Miami's needs, and then just figure out the extra stuff. So the shooting can really come with a lot of those guys you're throwing out. Like, I know some of the names, like the Grant Williams thing, I know is a little bit more difficult because you mentioned the contract thing, but like a shooter of that caliber, or like the Torrey Craigs of the world, or those type of PJ Washingtons of the world that can just provide a little bit of shooting. The Jared Vanderbilt one's weird because you're not getting the shooting, but I just really like Jared Vanderbilt as a player. And I feel like, I don't know who would value him more than Eric Spoelstra. Like the ways that he would use a Jared Vanderbilt type within his system, defensively, rebounding, like we talk about a big, that guy would be probably as much of a center on this team as Bam is, probably, if they got him on this team. That's how much they would utilize him in that way. So he's interesting. So definitely, I think it's more of like the 4 that can probably ideally play some 5, not 5 in the NBA, 5 in a Miami Heat jersey, because that's obviously a different level, but I think that's kind of the ideal spot.
Jared Vanderbilt's in a weird spot because I still don't know if that team is trying to compete or not, but it doesn't seem like he fits the timeline of where they're going. And just to close on this, and then I'll let, if Greg has any final thoughts, he can jump in on it. One of the things that is going to be so intriguing about this, and we've discussed this before, is that the league is a mess right now. It really is. Like when I had conversations with Heat officials in the Bahamas in training camp, they were saying they thought there were 20 to 22 teams that were competitive for playoff spots. There are some teams that they didn't think would be competitive for playoff spots that are. And there are also some teams we thought would be much better than they are and are not. Okay. I mean, the Western Conference is flipped. Like there are, it's all over the place. Okay. As far as, and now you've got, see that Brady and I have talked about this on the Step Pack pod, which is the NBA pod we do for Fansided. You've got Anthony Davis out for the Lakers for at least a month. You've got Steph Curry out. So those are, I don't think anybody expect the Lakers to be particularly good, but those are two teams that may not even, I mean, Golden State will probably make at least the play-in, but they're not going to be in the same spot they were in. This has given an opportunity for teams like New Orleans, for, we said Utah should have dropped out by now. It hasn't completely happened. Minnesota, we just saw them. They're not as good as they were supposed to be, right? The Clippers can't stay healthy consistently, where they can really make a run. And even in the East is a little bit more true to form, because now you're seeing Brooklyn emerge with Milwaukee, with Boston, Philadelphia getting healthier. The East is a little more what we expected. The West is such a mess. I don't know which of those teams are going to be buying, which of those teams are going to be selling. I don't think the Heat know yet. And that's going to lead to some players you didn't think would be available that are going to be available. It's also going to lead to some trades where maybe the Heat can kind of get in as the third or fourth team and pick up a guy who would be functional here. The good thing for Miami, and then I'll let Greg close. The good thing for Miami is once we get to the middle of January, if they're still like in the mix, okay, my understanding is they're not going all in, because all in requires paying the luxury tax under any circumstances. They're not doing that, okay? I think the chance of them paying the luxury tax is like 10 to 15%. It's not going to happen unless they get a really big name, and I don't think that's happening. But I do think, that they are committed to stay the hell out of the play-in. Okay. That's not a place that the Heat want to be. And unfortunately, if you're a Heat fan, if you look at the East right now, you look at Milwaukee, you look at Boston, you look at Cleveland, you look at Brooklyn now, and you look at Philadelphia, there are 5 teams there that I think are all going to be in the top 6. To me, if you're Miami, your goal now really is to get the 5 or the 6. It's just to stay out of the play-in, right? And even to do that, to hold off in Atlanta, to hold off a Knicks, which they weren't expected to be there, you need to make a move. And I think they know that. Like, I think it would be humiliating for the Heat to be in the play-in this year and possibly be one and done, one game and out, okay, if they're the 8th seed, let's say, after they just won the East in the regular season last year and were a shot from the finals. I think that is not where they want to be. So I do think they'll make some kind of a move to at least make sure that they stay above that level and that they can be competitive in a 4-5, 3-6 matchup, even as the road team, because we've seen they haven't played well at home this year anyway. So I feel like there's not as big of a difference. Greg, I'll let you close.
It feels like we're trending in the direction of let's just be as healthy as we can be heading into a matchup that is not in the play-in, to your point. So it's all about getting, which right now there are 2 games, I think, in the loss column out of the 6th spot. So they can get there pretty quickly. This is the one thing I'll mention as it relates to Dwayne Dedmon, because we keep talking about attaching him with Duncan Robinson for a larger upgrade. I just want to caution fans in thinking that is going to become something that becomes a viable option. Maybe it will come to fruition, but I doubt it, frankly. So I would more look at what Dwayne Dedmon could fetch. And this is the other part of it that I just want to close with. You could look at younger players around the league, like particularly guys that are in Detroit, like Isaiah Stewart or Sadiq Bey, who are on rookie contracts that make less than Dwayne Dedmon. And you could find ways to get guys like that and instead of using picks, maybe your sweetener becomes a player that you're not going to move forward with, like a Max Strus, like a Gabe Vincent, and that'll tie into what we talk about on our next episode. So I just think that there's more options than maybe we've given the front office credit for to do just what you're saying, Ethan. Not take the big swing to turn this into a team that's going for a title in a different form. Maybe that'll come this summer. For now, it's get an upgrade to get the hell out of the play-in.
Yeah, I think that's where they're at. And you mentioned it. Our next episode actually will be the post game after Heat Lakers. We don't know if LeBron's going to play, by the way, because he's playing in Orlando and he doesn't always play these back-to-backs, particularly when the second night of a back-to-back is in Miami. So I'm not sure that Alex, Brady, and Gad, who are going to be at that game, are going to get to see LeBron up close. But our episode after that, we are going to get into the Gabe and Max question, because I think we went into the season thinking they would extend both of them. I don't think that's happening. I think it's maybe extend one of them. We're going to have a discussion about which one you would extend. And I'm with Greg. If you're not extending them, then make them available in trades, because if Gabe's the guy you're not extending, there's viability for a backup point guard, who can defend and can handle a little bit. And we saw, at least until this season, could shoot. And for Max, a shooter who's, shown some versatility and was playing as a starter in the Eastern Conference Finals. So we will get into the Max and Gabe questions. Thanks to Alex. Thanks to Brady. Thanks to Greg. Thanks to our sponsor, c-armstaffing.com. Prize Picks, use that code 5 FIVE. Better Edge, use that code 5 RSN. Have a good night.
Thank you for listening to the Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network.